World War I's longest battle, and one of its most famous, was the Battle of Verdun. Over 700,000 soldiers died over 300 days of battling. One of those soldiers died at the beginning of the battle on March 4, 1916, at the young age of 36, and left a sketchbook on the front lines. In it, you can see landscapes and animals, all depicted with very strong and violent lines. The owner of the sketchbook was Franz Marc, and his presence in Verdun wasn't his first visit to France. Indeed, Marc traveled to Paris, as many young artists did, in 1903 and again in 1907, to visit different museums and joined the different art circles. But it was only in 1911 that Franz Marc founded Der Blaue Reiter, or the Blue Rider, an important art movement in German Expressionism. Out of all the things he accomplished during his short life, the foundation of the Blue Rider has to be one of the most important. He created it with other notable artists of the time, including most famously Wassily Kandinsky. The name Blue Rider came from Kandinsky's interest in riders and Marc's obsession over horses. With their combined love for the color blue, the name Blue Rider came about. Both artists had a very particular relationship to blue. Marc saw blue as the masculine principle, astringent and spiritual. Yellow, the female principle, gentle, gay, and sensuous. Red is matter, brutal and heavy, and always the color that the other two must oppose and overcome. Kandinsky, on the other hand, wrote that the deeper the blue becomes, the more strongly it calls man towards the infinite, awakening in him a desire for the pure and finally for the supernatural. Blue was, to both founders of the Blue Rider, a spiritual color, a color representing something bigger than ourselves, something powerful. What bound the artists in the Blue Rider group wasn't their similar style like it was for the Cubists, for example. What united them was the idea that art is spiritual, that it can heal humanity from its alienation, that it can heal it from the anger and tension boiling in Europe at the beginning of the 20th century. Art was a way for men to connect with their spiritual roots. So back to Franz Marc, his way of expressing the spiritual element of humanity was not to depict humans as you might assume. On the whole, instinct has never failed to guide me, especially the instinct which led me away from man's awareness of life and towards that of a pure animal. An animal's unadulterated awareness of life made me respond with everything that was good. Painting animals and their awareness of life. Painting animals was Marc's way to depict the purity of nature, to represent a certain harmony. Humanity, corrupted by industry and modern life, can't bond with nature as it once did in its primitive form. The only way to access the purity, the harmony, and the spirituality of nature is by accessing it through the world of animals. His blue horses, which he repeatedly reproduced, have to be, at least to me, one of the best representation of this search for spirituality. We can look, for example, at Blue Horse 1, where you see the horse replicating the shapes of the hills in the background, creating harmony in a mix of yellow, blue, and red. In Blue Horse 2, on the other hand, we're taking the blue horse's point of view as we would, for example, in Friedrich's Wanderer Above a Sea of Fog. But the striking difference between Blue Horse 1 and 2 is that, from the blue horse's perspective, there is no red, the brutal and heavy. There is no violent color. The large blue horses made in 1911 also depict the harmony between animals and nature. The organic shape of both the horses and the mountains mix. The only thing telling them apart is their bright, saturated color. But as World War I approached and social tension rose, Franz Marc changed his style. His art, which was then striving for spirituality, became darker and more violent. He met Robert Delaunay in 1912, who would influence him by introducing him to Futurism and Cubism. In 1913, his blue horses went from being at harmony with nature to this. The Tower of Blue Horses is much more dynamic and one could say more violent than Marc's previous paintings. This artwork has an interesting history. It was confiscated by the Nazis, labeled degenerate art, and was to be exposed at the Degenerate Art exhibition to be ridiculed. I made a video about this if you're interested. However, because Marc died fighting for Germany in World War I, his painting ended up not being exposed at the Nazi exhibition. Sadly, the Tower of Blue Horses got lost in 1945 at the end of World War II and still hasn't been recovered. This newly dynamic and violent depiction of animals will finally be at its peak in one of Marc's most famous artwork, The Fate of the Animals. This is one of his most violent depictions of animal figures. It's showing a forest fire, the red diagonal shapes sharply cut through the canvas, replicating the brutality of flames. Remember, to Marc, red was the brutal and heavy color. The horses, the boars, and especially the deer seem to be suffering, a reality rarely depicted by Marc. The original title of the painting was "The Trees Show Their Rings, the Animals Their Veins," but that was then changed to "The Fate of the Animals." On the back of the canvas, the original title was completed by "And all being is flaming suffering." In a sadly ironic turn of events, the painting itself would turn into flames in 1916, just a couple of months after Marc's death. Paul Klee, another expressionist, would restore the painting, adding a brown tint to his own work. Perhaps Klee wanted to leave a trace of this irony. He didn't want to cover up the beauty of a burnt painting depicting a forest fire. Franz Marc was sent a postcard reproduction of this painting during the war. He sent a letter back writing, "At first glance I was completely shaken. It is like a premonition of this war, horrible and gripping. I can hardly believe that I painted it." Marc saw in his painting a premonition of war, but what he didn't see was a premonition of his own death. The animals which he painted, through which he was hoping to achieve spirituality and peace, burned and suffered through the ravages of a forest fire, the same way Marc himself would suffer and perish through the ravages of World War I. I wanted to let you know that I'm very excited for my next video. You really should stay tuned if you like Dali and politics. Also stay tuned because I'm planning something special for when I hit 5,000 subscribers, which I'm also very excited for. And as always, I'd like to thank my patrons for all their wonderful support. If you want to join them and help me out with the growth of this channel, check out patreon.com/thecanvas.